Luckily there's a landing spot right here, so we don't have to go all the way around to the rescue hub. Next up, we have 2 pages to find, and no special Brickster bots to take out. So this is a relatively short trip. I actually don't know if it's the case in the PC version or if it is more complicated, because again, a lot of things have been toned down a little bit. The next area in particular will be the first, to my knowledge, that's actually missing content compared to the PC version. I'll be sure to point that out whenever we get there. It's actually very obvious because they mention it, even if it's not actually an interactive sequence. It's kind of odd, actually. Again, there are a couple instances, it feels like, where they definitely should have fine-tuned some of the dialogue to better suit the PS1 version where certain content was absent, but oh well. I have no clue where these next 2 pages are, if I'm being completely honest here, so we'll just look around until we find them. I think both of them could be closer to the police station area, if I'm not mistaken, because that is where we'll end up in general, because ultimately, we need something at the police station to actually access the next area. I see one, actually, right over here. In theory, we could start talking to people, again, since you can talk to people twice to get a hint, but as expected, the last one in this set is by the police station.
Pepper, I hereby deputize you so you can use the police helicopter, which is pretty cool.
Whoa, it is cool, but I bet I can make it look even cooler.
Personally, I can't think of anything cooler than a black and white cop copter. But you can customize it like any vehicle if you'd like to.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome, Deputy Pepper. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you your mission, which isn't customizing the helicopter. You've got to head to the desert. Reports indicate that a page is there.
I'm on it, sir.
Again, we don't have to worry about the gray Brickster bots here, they're only for score. But our next stop is the desert, and the warp should be above the space center. So we'll need to hop into this helicopter and make our way over there. The helicopter doesn't control super well. X goes forward, square goes back, and then you control up and down with the D-pad or control stick, and you can also turn like this. So it's a little bit unwieldy, but not too bad. So let's fly over here and see what awaits us. And with that, we've made it to the desert. So let's find a place to land.
Ahoy, aloha, and welcome to Adventurers Island. I'm Johnny Thunder, and this is the lovely...
Miss Pippin Reed at your service. And you are?
Pepper, ma'am. I mean, Pepper. Not Pepper, ma'am, just Pepper. I'm from Lego Island, and I'm here in search of...
Oh, I know. The lost pages of the...
Constructopedia? Yeah. The informatic told us earlier that you'd show up and you'd need some help getting to the Oasis.
He's right.
He usually is. But listen, we got a situation here having to do with snakes and gems. If you help us, we'll help you.
Let's do it!
Instead of chalices, you can find gems around this area that will increase your score. We also have an airport. We'll be heading there later, but for now, let's head over here and help them with their snake problem.
Protect the adventurer's gems by fending off the snakes as you travel across the desert.
Here they come.
This minigame is interesting. I feel like it controls very loosely. I don't remember if it was like that originally, though I kind of assume it is, given that, again, a lot of early PS1 controllers didn't actually have analog control, and thus, with a D-pad, this would be kind of loose. Though again, to be fair, I am using a DualSense for this, which might not be optimal. It's also worth mentioning on the subject that Lego Island 2 is actually the only PS1 game I kept from my childhood. My family got rid of a lot of PS1 games, I think, before a move, to cut down on the amount that we have to take from one place to another. And this is the one game I'm pretty sure I specifically wanted to keep because I have a lot of nostalgia for it. The only other PS1 game I actually own I got much later, which was actually a new copy of Final Fantasy IX about a decade ago actually. It was actually really easy to get certain Square Enix PS1 games, since a lot of them were still being printed at that time. But unfortunately, it is the greatest hits version with like the green spine, which is generally not worth as much. But anyway, the minigame here is actually not too bad. We have to fend off the snakes, and they're going to try to steal our 20 gems. We obviously can't lose them all. I do like this car though, of all things, because I remember having this car. I'm pretty sure the license plate was even the same as the one from the set I had. Johnny Thunder is another line that's very nostalgic to me, so again, I do like this area for that reason, even if some of the mini-games are a little bit rough at times. I'm not the biggest fan of a couple of them, though I will say I do think the jousting one is one of the worst, because of having to button mash that way. I also don't like how in this mission, it's very sporadic with what does and doesn't have studs, which definitely makes it feel kind of not like LEGO at times.
Oh, you're definitely not coconut shy, are you, Pepper? Coconut shy.
Oh, you startled me. Hello, Johnny and Miss Reed. I see you brought a friend.
Yes, Doctor. This is Pepper, and he's...
Pepperoni!
And he's here to help us get the gems back from the snakes and...
Then we're helping him look for the lost pages of the Constructopedia. The Infomaniac's in him.
Oh, the Infomaniac. Any friend of mine is a friend of mine, or something like that.
Gentlemen, shall we press on?
Let's do it!
So our next stop is this temple over here.
Whack the snakes to keep them down, but swipe the gems off for the adventurers.
So we have another round of whack-a-mole, but the only difference is, if you see a gem, you have to double tap the button to get the gem back. This is obviously a little bit more complicated, and I'm kind of at the mercy of if my controller decides to take my inputs or not in some cases. Like there, it didn't exactly take in time, unfortunately. So I'm not entirely sure how we'll do at this. I remember struggling a bit with this minigame. Again, I'm definitely not tapping it fast enough. There we go, finally. And we can't keep track of both at the top left and right of the screen, so we have 7 gems and 28 snakes at the moment. In some ways I almost feel like this is easier because in the first round, if you hit the Infomaniac, you're staggered for a bit and can easily lose ground. While in this case, we don't have to worry about any stagger mechanics, so at the very least, it's a little bit simpler in that regard. In general, this is enjoyable. It's also a little bit tougher because they don't show the button icons, so in this case it's not really a problem, since they do match up directionally in this case. We have about 20 seconds left. I definitely almost missed a snake just because I looked at the timer for too long. Overall, this is actually going pretty well, other than accidentally hitting a couple of snakes that had the gems. Yeah, overall this isn't too bad, so I'm curious to see what ranking we end up getting here.
Lovely job, Pepper. Whap, bap, stun the snake, and a lovely tinkle of rescued gems. Pepper, a page is spotted at the mummy's tomb. Not spotted like polka dots or a leopard, but you know what I mean. Someone saw the page. I mean, not saw like cut in half. The point is that there is a page at the mummy's tomb. It's behind a locked door, so you'll need to go to the room of matching mummies to find the key. Oh, I almost forgot. Remember, there is a page at the mummy's tomb and a page at the oasis. And I've just heard that there's a page in the jungle. Catch you later, brick you later. And, good luck.
Right then, here's a plan. We'll take the biplane. Dr. Kilroy, if you loan your speedster to Pepper, he can meet us there after he's finished here.
Makes sense to me. A little bit. Pepper will meet us at the oasis. Okay, I'll get to ride in the back of the plane. Good fun. Very good.
Exactly. Miss Reed, will you make a signpost? A marker for Pepper so he can find us at the oasis?
Oh, yes, that would be great fun.
Fun? You're an odd one, Miss Reed, but we love you for it. Now, Pepper, we'll meet you at the biplane by the oasis when you're done here.
Okie dokie, to the matching mummy's tomb for me.
And the tomb should be right over here by the car.
Match the symbols in the coffins, get the Constructopedia page, and escape the Rolling Rock.
This is one where I basically guarantee I'm not getting a good ranking, because I've always struggled with this. It's also luck-based, which is not necessarily my strongest suit, to be honest. I also am not the best at memorization, I'm realizing, as I kind of realized I wasn't really keeping track of everything. But in my case, I also admit that trying to actually talk over this probably isn't really helping. We also have another set of coffins on the other side, by the way, so we have to double check over here. We have like 2 to 3 minutes for this, so it's not too bad, but it can be a little bit overwhelming at times, especially if you're trying to go for the gold medal. Which again, I don't think I've ever gotten. A lot of these are surprisingly strict, if I'm being honest. I definitely thought the last one, for example, we were closer than we actually were, but we actually didn't get a gold in that one either. I forget what the symbol is over here, so we'll double check. That is not the right one, so we only have 4 options left, so at least we've narrowed it down pretty well. So this one has to be here, and the other one has to be on the other side. So with that taken care of, we have about 1 minute and 45-ish seconds to get the page through this door over here. We also have some very precariously placed columns that totally won't be a problem in a bit. I also forgot you had to go over here to actually open the gate, which is kind of annoying. But let's head over here and get the page, hopefully without too much trouble.
I got myself another Constructopedia page.
And now we have to dodge a rolling rock out of this chamber.
You hardly put a foot wrong there, Pepper. Maybe you should sort out my sock drawer for me. I guarantee no boulders.
So that's everything we can do here for now, other than potentially collecting gems, but to be honest, I actually don't see any here. So let's take their car to the oasis.
Race to the oasis, avoiding any obstacles along the way.
This is actually, in my opinion, one of the most annoying missions, because as you might be able to tell, the handling isn't exactly the best, and then if you get a boost and start losing control, you can definitely careen into a lot of objects. We also have these little bricks. The red bricks give you a small shield temporarily, and the green bricks give you a boost, which in some ways might be more of a detriment than a benefit in some cases. We also have these little ruins in the way, unfortunately. I don't know how I crashed into that, because I could have sworn I was holding left. This feels surprisingly slippery and also surprisingly tight at the same time. It's kind of weird how it feels like both sometimes. I feel like it's also partially because you're kind of turning like the entire front of the car section, so you're kind of just careening all over the place. You're not necessarily like steering like you'd think you'd be steering in like a traditional racing game. Again, it's just a mini game. It makes sense this might not be the most fine-tuned, but that doesn't stop it from being very annoying. We also have UFOs here that'll shrink us down, and Mario Kart style will keep us from going as fast. So we definitely lost a lot of time there, unfortunately. I think we're getting pretty close. We also have twisters with cows. Come to think of it, were there even such a thing as Lego cows at this time? I actually don't know. I thought those were introduced a lot later. At least I don't remember having any at the time.
That's an incredible time. Easily rode a hog standard. Maybe you should be a driver.
And now we're back here. So we have to go to the airport next.
Hey, good news. I caught a big fish and... Uh-oh. Is everybody all right?
Well, the doctor here has heat exposure.
Oh, I've heard of that before. A friend of mine is a talent agent, and he said you could die from exposure.
I think that's a different kind of exposure. But if you take the biplane, we could take the doctor in the seaplane where it's a little cooler. Follow us.
Way cool. I get to fly a biplane. Life is good.
Try to shoot the targets as many times as possible, but don't forget to collect bananas and fuel.
I also remember having this plane as an actual Lego set. But with that last cutscene, we do have a plot hole, because Pepper mentions catching a fish. That is actually a mini-game in the PC version that was omitted from the PS1 version. To my understanding, there should be one more minigame type that will come up later that was also missing from the PC version. But in general, it is almost impressive for the time, having a fairly faithful version of a game like Lego Island 2 on a console, given that in general, PCs I think were a little bit more powerful at the time. I'm actually not sure on that, to be honest. I do know in a lot of cases, other console games did have like simplified content or reduced content on console versions just because of hardware limitations. This also doesn't play great, it is inverted, which isn't exactly my preference, so it doesn't make sense in a plane to actually be inverted. We also want to hit as many of the targets as possible, while also keeping track of our fuel gauge on the right, both indicated by the timer and the gauge on the side, if I'm not mistaken. So we have two separate time gauges, essentially, that represent the same thing, oddly enough. But basically, we're trying to get as high of a score as possible before we land over here.
Very nice, Peppa. You swooped through the jungle like Tarzan. Well, without the vine or the jungle cry, but you know what I mean.
So now that we're over in the jungle, we want to go over there where we actually have a T-Rex.
Ah, you don't say. Okay, well, the T-Rex has just informed me that the dinosaurs are being held prisoner at the main camp. If someone can rescue them, he will take them there.
Guide the T-Rex as he carries you to the main camp.
I'll be honest, I don't really care for this minigame. I find it really unwieldy for some reason. I feel like I constantly am crashing into things, and a lot of times it's hard to tell what counts as something that will hurt you or not. Also, that was just cheap, having it land directly on me like so. To be honest, having to hold right at all times, while also having to press up and down to change lanes is also kind of uncomfortable in my opinion. And we do have 2 jump buttons and also a dedicated roar button, which is nice. But in general, I find it a little bit difficult to switch lanes too quickly because of having to hold forward at all times. And then you have a bunch of timing obstacles like the swinging logs and everything, and this just kind of becomes a headache after a while. Also, there are certain times where you think you might be able to pass through something and it's actually like a barricade, so a lot of times it's just a little bit unwieldy. That was a case of me accidentally pressing up while just trying to hold right, essentially. In general, I feel like I never have good runs with this mission. I've gotten gold more times than I would expect given how badly I play, so we'll have to see how this goes. We now have this section with nets that we have to dodge. Also worth mentioning, at the end of the mission, we'll probably sit on the end screen for a bit, because I remember the Infomaniac does have a line at the end, but it takes a long time for it to play for some reason. So if you're wondering why we'll probably end up waiting at the end of the stage, that's why. We should be getting pretty close to the end actually, just a few more obstacles to dodge.
Not only do you get to jockey a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but you do it like you've done it all your life.